Hello YouTubers, welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha and I'm on to The Lovely Bones today, Peter Jackson's 2009 supernatural drama. The the film itself is based on a book by Alice Sebold, and it chronicles the life and early death of the central character Susie Salmon, played by. Now here we go. Here's another name for you. I'm going to falter over. Swasi Roman. Suarez. Why can't people just be called Susan or Samantha anymore? That's what's tripping me up. Everybody in movies now has this really weird name that I can't pronounce. Suarez Roman plays Susie Salmon, and it follows. She's a 14-year-old girl living in middle-class suburban America in 1973, and she. Very early on in the story, she runs into her neighbour, who turns out to be a paedophile serial killer, and she ends up getting raped and murdered by her next door neighbour. And then the rest of the film deals with her family coping with the grief, but it's done from her point of view. So you see her go, well, not to heaven. I think they make out that it's the afterlife that she's in. She's in limbo. She's sort of in a state before she's reached heaven, and but she's still sort of looking down on her parents and her siblings, her family, and seeing them cope with the grief, and also keeping tabs on the man that killed her as well. So it's dark subject matter for sure. I think this is an attempt by Jckson after over a decade of doing blockbuster fare, to do something a bit smaller and weightier, more in the vein of the Heavenly Creatures. I think you kind of get the sense that he wanted another critical darling on his hands. I have to say though that this film falls short of those aspirations. It's Heavenly Creatures, it isn't, and it doesn't quite work for a number of reasons. It's one of the reasons really is that Heavenly Creatures really didn't shy away from its dark subject matter and its dark source material. Yes, you get these. You can see in both instances what attracted Jckson to the project, because although it's weighty subject matter, both films have this strong fantasy elements. In Heavenly Creatures, you had the fantasy world of the two central characters, and how they could escape into there. And Jckson really has a ball visualizing that world. Here it's the afterlife. It's his attempt to go from the ordinary, the mundane, the suburban, to realizing this fantastical design for the afterlife. And so you can see what attracted him to the project. I have to say though that although the look of the afterlife is well realized, it's nothing. It doesn't really stand out like I was expecting it to. I thought, okay, Peter Jckson doing the afterlife, it's going to be something quite extraordinary. The man who realized Rivendell, sort of putting his view of heaven on screen. I thought it would be the most beautiful, astounding imagery we'd see in a film that year, and I don't know what it is, but I was left kind of nonplussed. There was I don't know, a real sort of mundanity to it, and it wasn't very original. I didn't think there there was a Robin Williams film that came out in the 90s called What Dreams May Come, which dealt with the afterlife. And a lot of the imagery was very reminiscent of that. There's there's one possible reading of this film is it is about coping with grief, and Susie Salmon has a little brother in the film who paints a picture of a rainbow, and he says after she dies, he says that's where Susie is, and then you see her later on in the picture and under the rainbow. So it's one of those films where, because you're on tricky ground when you're covering something like the afterlife, which I think is why they didn't explicitly state it's heaven. It's a limbo state before heaven, and one possible reading of the film is that you're not really seeing the afterlife at all. You're just seeing maybe a child's imagination on screen, and his interpretation of death and what his sister might be going through. So who knows? I know that Lynn Ramsey, the director of We Need to Talk About Kevin and Ratcatcher, she was originally attached to adapt this book, and I have to say I think she might have been a better choice for director, because Jckson really seems to want to shy away from the dark subject matter, and I don't think she would have. Anyone who's seen We Need to Talk About Kevin, there's a woman who can create a beautiful looking film. There's some stunning imagery in that, but at the same time, you really feel the horror of the situation in that film. And for a film like this that deals with an awful event, the rape and murder of a child, essentially, or a child who's sort of on the verge of womanhood, it's it's dealt very, very lightweight. Heavenly Creatures had an R rating, an 18 rating in this country. This film, Peter Jackson shot for a PG-13, 12A, and I think that was really a mistake. If you didn't know what the plot of this film was, I think the actual murder scene would have come across as it comes across as very lightweight. I mean, she's kind of comes into contact with her neighbour, played by Stanley Tucci. Played very well, actually. It would have been very easy just to make this villain a kind of stock creepy villain, but he makes it a fully realised character. He doesn't. He comes across as creepy, but he also gives him a layer of charm as well, because I guess characters like this would have had to have a slight layer of charm to them to be able to, so the character could lure his victims to their deaths in the first place. And so he gives him a layer of charm, and maybe charm's not the right word, but he can come across as a nice person on the surface, despite having he's got contact lenses in to make him look slightly shifting. They give him a bit of a comb over and make him look a bit sweaty. So they play both fields. But he's one of the more successfully realised characters in the film. But yeah, like I say, I mean, the murders treated very matter of factly. The way it's shot is you see her getting away, and then she's running for her parents, and then she sees her dad, played by Mark Wahlberg, but he doesn't see her, and then it gradually transpires that she's dead. and so you don't actually see the murder. And it's not that I wanted particularly to see the murder, but it's the death is treated like just in many other Hollywood movies. It's Ghost would be a good example. But even Ghost, you see sort of Patrick Swayze covered in blood. So I guess I was. I wanted to see something a bit darker, a bit more upsetting. Maybe not actually the murder itself, but some touch that would allude to the awful situation that Susie Salmon would have gone through. And I think Lynn Ramsey would have treated scenes like the death of the central character with a lot more gravitas than Pete Jckson manages here. He's he's playing it a bit too safe for my liking. Very I mean, it's a very subdued direction from Jckson, funnily enough, on this one. I think he's shooting on digital for the first time, so there's kind of a sort of flatter quality to the images on display. I mean, it doesn't look cheap or anything, apart from maybe in one or two close-up shots. There's a scene where Susie's sister breaks into the neighbour's house, and she finds evidence under the floorboards, and there's fingers are running along the floorboards, and there you can kind of see the digital quality to the image. But for the rest of the film, maybe that's what led to the sort of the flatness of the images, the imagery in the afterlife sequence, because it's kind of the difference between, say, The Phantom Menace, which was shot on celluloid, and then episodes 2 and 3, which were shot on digital. And there is a sort of flatness to CGI when you shoot on digital. So maybe that's what kind of prevented me from being bowled over by some of the imagery in this. I mean, it's don't get me wrong, it does look good, but it's not spectacular. It's not no one's citing this film for the imagery the same way they are with Lord of the Rings now, for example. So yeah, like I say, there's a child. This film seems to suggest that everyone gets their own heaven or their own afterlife, and there's a childlike quality to the imagery of the afterlife, because Susie's still a child. Like I say, with all other Jckson movies, he has a real a pawn shot with character again. Even though he, like I say, this is based on a pre-existing novel, a pre-existing work. It's a shame really that Jckson really hasn't written anything original or from his own imagination since The Frighteners, so for over 20 years now. I know he has said from time to time that he harbours a desire to go back and do another splatter movie, and I'd love to see that, but maybe when he does, he'll base it on something that's already pre-existing. So I'd love to go to see him do something from his own imagination again, because even Heavenly Creatures, although that's a true story, like I say, it's not based on any pre-existing work like this film is. He went out and actually did the footwork and did the research, and Fran Walsh in writing the screenplay. So I'd like to see him do that kind of footwork in the scripting stages again. The characters, they are well defined. Some of them are, some of them less so. I think the two best characters that come across in the film are Stanley Tucci as the neighbour, and Susan Sarandon as the grandma. But I mean, she's very fleeting in the film. She only has a number of scenes. She kind of turns up and to help the family out, and cope with her grief. But she's always got a smile on her face and a drink in her hand. She's very funny in the film. Mark Wahlberg as well does a good job as the father. Interesting, the character, they originally cast Ryan Gosling, but and they actually started filming with him, but then they realised a few days in that they'd cast too young, so they did a very quick recasting with Mark Wahlberg. And considering that it was he was actually joined the production after they started shooting it. It doesn't show in his performance. He's very good. You also get forget the guy's name. Hang on. Michael Imperioli from the Chris from The Sopranos, as the police investigator investigating the crime. It's very pleased to see anyone from The Sopranos turn up. I'll have to do a retrospective on The Sopranos one day, because it is, I think it's one of the greatest TV shows of all time. So they come across as well, slightly less successfully realised. I think Rachel Weisz as Wahlberg's wife. She's given a bit of a plot, but it's kind of forgettable, where she ends up leaving Wahlberg and going off and finding her own way, and it's her way of coping with the grief, which it actually is apparently not an uncommon occurrence, but it's. She's kind of ill-served by the script, really, because it's done very matter-of-factly, and it's largely forgettable. In fact, when I went back and rewatched it, I completely forgotten that Rachel Weisz is in this film. And it's not that she hasn't done memorable performances in other things, it's just she's really not given much to work with in this. I think one of the big problems with the film actually is Swasey Roman and the Susie Salmon character, because she's I think what ultimately where this film falls down is the central character just isn't that interesting, despite what happens to her. Obviously what happens to her is interesting, but she's kind of poorly realised as a character, I think, Swasey Roman. And I don't know if this is I haven't read the book, so I don't know if this is a fault with the source material. But, it's the character, like, all you really know about her is she's a girl from 70s suburban America, and she dies. And you never really get a sense of who this character is and what makes her tick. I mean, interesting enough, a week or two ago I saw Spike Lee's Crooklyn, which was as a sort of, although that's set in New York, it has a similar time period setting, but that deals with a whole family of teenagers, and you really get a sense of it really feels genuine and realistic, that film, because you see them round the dinner table laughing and joking and criticizing each other, and then you have scenes in that film of them round the TV watching The Partridge Family or basketball, and you really get a sense of character there through this, because it feels genuine. You feels like this is Spike Lee's youth rendered realistically on screen. That's a film I've been wanting to review for a week or two now since seeing it, so that might be an upcoming video. But there you get, I mean, Spike Lee was in his 30s when he made that film, so I think he can still kind of remember what it was like to be a teenager, whereas Jckson and his screenwriters, when they made The Lovely Bones, Van Walsh and Philippa Boyens again, they would have all been in their 40s, so you kind of get an impression that they kind of forgotten what it was like to be a teenager. And I can imagine they probably were that atypical teenagers anyway. They were probably the little weird kids. So I think they struggle in realising what a genuine teenagers would have been like. At no point do you see her sort of staring at the posters on her walls in this film, or I don't know, just doing anything that feels kind of genuine. So she's kind of poorly realised as a character, and her narration in the film is very sort of one key. It's very what you'd expect. I was alive, then I died, and then my killer, then no more my family. It's very one note, and I think they went for an ethereal touch, but after a while it just becomes monotonous. So yeah, I mean, it's a film that's it's average. It's an average film, and it was a little disappointing because I was expecting a lot more. It was not terrible, but it's not Heavenly Creatures by any stretch of the imagination. The ending as well really doesn't work. From what I understand, because I read a brief synopsis of the plot, the book starts straight away with her murder, and then you see the rest sort of in flashback and her point of view from the afterlife. And at the start of the film, her body is buried in a sinkhole and never seen again. Here they invent this thing where she's kind of solving the mystery of her death from the afterlife, and she actually realizes her body is buried in holed up in a safe in Stanley Tucci's house. Oh yeah, so just to go back a bit, Stanley Tucci does this thing where he builds a little den in the middle of a wheat field, and that's where he lures Susie Salmon to. He says he's done it for the kids in the neighbourhood, and it's like right in the middle of this field under a trap door, and you think, right, how the hell? Because it's like the size of probably like the size of this room here, You think, how the hell did no one ever see him build this thing, And after her neighbour goes missing, and do you know one thing to say? Oh, hang on, I saw him in the field in that he doesn't own, burrowing up great mounds of earth to make this little den. Maybe we should just eliminate all options. Just go check this place out that he's definitely built, and everyone saw him do it. So that's that was a little sort of lapse in logic there. The film, the end of the film, really, like the last 20 minutes just doesn't work for me for so many reasons. There's this part at the end where she's trying to make contact with this boy that at the start of the film he asks her out, and then her death happens, and then the end of the film seems to be the resolution to that story, where she finally makes contact with someone from the real world, and it's this boy. But I mean, to be honest, like by the end of the film, like I'd completely forgotten this subplot that this guy had asked her out, and that I was thinking, oh, well, so the whole point of this film, it was just leading to her, because it is about a girl sort of grasp from womanhood before her time, I suppose. But all she wanted was a kiss from this guy that I could barely remember from the start of the film. Right, I thought the film was about her family and her family dealing with her loss. I mean, maybe that's the point, that you could never get over as a situation as tragic as this, and so maybe it's right that there wasn't any resolution there. But I really, when they were trying to resolve this whole first dates plot line, I was like, well, who cares about this, and then that's all juxtaposed with images of Tucci's character pushing the safe towards the sinkhole, and it just goes on forever. I think, oh, just get that thing down the hole. And then his maybe I can't be too critical of this because I think maybe in better hands it would have been realised better, and in real life there are no safe resolutions to things, but the resolution to his character is kind of it's I can see why audiences were slightly disappointed. They wanted more justice doled out for the Stanley Tucci character. There is a little bit of he does get his comeuppance in the film, but it feels almost kind of, I won't spoil it, but it feels kind of tacked on and almost incidental, and almost like the filmmakers felt an obligation to put this scene into, otherwise the audience members would have. I think it's in the book, the scene, but it feels sort of almost obligatory when it happens, the resolution. So there you go. Like I said, right, with my it's the same thing with my King Kong review. It might sound like I've been very critical of this film, and like I say, it isn't a horrible film. It isn't a really bad film. But what my disappointment with the film is really the same issues I have with King Kong, which is I really wanted this to be a lot better than it was, and it sadly fell short. And it could have been a lot better had Jckson and Philippa Boyens and Fran Walsh really embraced the darkness of the film and went full tilt with it, rather than sugarcoating it almost. It feels like, and trying to appeal to a mass market, but appeal to a mass market and a bigger audience with a film that has really dark subject matter. Feels kind of disingenuous. So yeah, there you go. A film made by skilled hands. Definitely, but it falls short of its potential. I should just mention as well, one thing I do like about the film, because there are things I do like about the film. Some of the performances, some of the production design, and Brian Eno does the score for this film, and always. Fascinated to see anything by Eno. I think he does deserve his reputation as a musical genius, and you get his trademark sort of guitar riffs coming through in this. It's just guitar synthesizer riffs coming through, and apparently there's a song towards the end, quite a beautiful song, as Susie Enters the Afterlife. That was a song actually written in 1973, but not recorded by anyone till 2008, 2009, when they made the film. He does a really engaging job, and it's like I say, anything by him is worth checking out and reckoning with. So there you go. That's my review of The Lovely Bones. Not great, but not terrible. And until next time, this is me, Big Buddha, signing off, and I shall see you all out there in YouTube land.